Are we ready for our next speaker? She's going to talk about the future of optimized e-commerce returns. She is from the company Signifyd, a proud sponsor of EEE Miami. They leverage its commerce network to maximize conversion, automate customer experience, and eliminate fraud and consumer abuse for retailers. Using big data and machine learning, they provide 100% financial guarantee against fraud and chargebacks on approved orders. Ashley is the Senior Director of Product Marketing and Communications at Signifyd, and she is a researcher and customer-obsessed marketing leader who is passionate about identifying key market opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ashley Kiolbasa.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It feels really good to be here today. I think this is my second live event total. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, second live event maybe in 2 years. So it's really great to see so many faces and to be able to network with all of you and to be back in person. I'm Ashley. I work for a company called Signifyd. For those of you that don't know Signifyd, we provide a commerce protection platform that recognizes the identity and intent of shoppers on your site, with the goal of eliminating fraud and abuse across the purchase journey and streamlining experiences for your best customers. So kind of an easy way to think about it is we help you understand when it's appropriate to let a customer take a certain action. Like, for example, drain the loyalty points in their account to make a purchase, or perform a card not present transaction, or to receive a refund for their return. We make sure that you are weighing risk and reward appropriately and getting the most upside from every interaction with your customer. And we're so confident in our decisions that we actually provide a financial guarantee. So generally that gives merchants the confidence to go ahead and automate order review or automate processing, because they know that if anything goes wrong or a fraudster slips through, we're going to go ahead and reimburse those losses 100%. But today I actually want to talk about returns specifically and optimizing e-commerce returns. So this is a topic that is very top of mind for the merchants that we work with. And I want to talk about how we can kind of shift our thinking around returns and move it from a cost of doing business or cost center to a profit center. How can we reimagine the way that we interact with our customers at that point of return so that we're forming deeper relationships with our customers, but also appropriately managing the risk that is kind of inherent with more liberal return policies, for example. So I'm going to start by outlining a few macro trends that are impacting returns today and really kind of begging for transformation of the returns process. Then I want to talk about a new kind of thought process for returns that I think it'll be beneficial for all of us to adopt in this post-pandemic world. And then finally, I don't want to leave you hanging. I want to leave you with some actionable advice or some guiding principles for optimizing returns in your business. Okay, so we are going to dive right in and talk about a few trends. So nobody here is going to be shocked when I say that the adoption of e-commerce significantly accelerated as a result of the pandemic. 2020, the year 2020 alone, shot us into projections that were previously forecast for 2025. So it makes sense then, of course, that if spend is shifting from physical to digital increasingly, that we're going to have more online returns as well, of course. But what we actually found was that, or really felt over the last couple of years, was that the rate of returns online is actually quite different than it is when you're in store. So it's estimated that about 8 to 10% of in-store sales actually result in a return. Whereas somewhere between 20 to 30% of e-commerce sales actually end up as a return. And while that difference is quite drastic, it also makes sense, right? Because you can't touch, feel, taste, smell, whatever you need to do with those products until they are physically in your hands as a consumer. So it's easier to make a mistake. It's easier for buyer's remorse to creep in. And as we're going to talk about in a second, it's easier for, there's more opportunities for malice online as well, which is definitely contributing to this rate. So we now officially have returns growing at a faster rate than online sales. So year over year, last year, we saw e-commerce grow about 14% as a whole overall. And year over year, last year, we saw returns grow at a rate of 17%. So it is an issue or a problem that is getting harder and harder to ignore as, again, more spend shifts online and as the growth rates for return continue to increase. One of the contributing factors, which leads to kind of trend 2 here, to the growth rate of those online returns is actually the proliferation of consumer abuse or fraud, or sometimes we call this friendly fraud. So it's estimated that about 8% of all online returns can actually be categorized as abusive. And actually, it's very likely that that number is underreported because definitions of abuse vary so widely from merchant to merchant. What one merchant might consider abusive behavior, another merchant would actually really welcome that type of behavior because of potentially the very positive customer experience that could go in hand with some of those behaviors. So I'm going to highlight a few of the types of abuse that we're seeing grow very quickly in popularity here. So the first is SNAD claims, or significantly not as described claims. So this is where a consumer receives product and they file a claim and they say the product was not as they hoped it would be. Maybe it was faulty product, they would like a refund. And consumers learn over time, of course there's some legitimacy to this claim. We've all been kind of duped at some point, seen some beautiful pictures online, and what we got in the box was not exactly what we had hoped for. But there's certainly a level of abuse associated with this claim as well. So consumers will learn that that merchants will actually refund quite quickly. So they'll make a claim, the retailer will send a return label, and then they'll get the refund instantly, and then there's no real incentive to actually return that product back. The retailer thinks that it's damaged, so they're not really going to follow up on that, and that consumer is able to keep the product and also, of course, enjoy that refund. In a similar vein, we have INR claims. So this is where a consumer claims that something was never received. And again, a level of legitimacy to this claim as well. I live in New York City. Porch theft is a real thing. You gotta watch your stoop, absolutely. But is INR really happening as often as your consumers are saying it's happening? Probably not. Again, as we kind of saw in the last presentation, when consumers figure out that there's a way to get free product or there's an in, they start to socialize that information. On YouTube, you'll see Reddit threads about how to kind of pull one over on a retailer. So these behaviors start to get learned and start to get socialized pretty quickly. Empty box returns. This one is a crowd favorite. So consumers will figure out that a refund is issued as soon as the label is scanned or a product is sent back. So they'll go ahead and send that box back, but unfortunately there's not going to be anything inside of it. The next item here is switch and ship. So this is where sometimes you'll see a retailer leverage weight as an indicator of return, or they'll use the weight of the package to make sure that the shipment has been returned appropriately. So a consumer will send something back. It just won't be what they actually purchased. So the most famous case here was actually a consumer who stuck a potato inside of an iPhone case, packaged it up, and went ahead and sent it back. It was the perfectly weighted potato, apparently. But this is also very common with like luxury goods. Someone will buy a luxury bag and they'll try to send a knockoff back to keep the real thing. Or they will, it's also very common with electronics. Somebody will purchase a device, they'll send the device back, but they're gonna keep the most valuable piece of that device. They're gonna keep the computer chip that's inside of it. They're gonna keep the accessories that came with that phone or whatever they purchased, and just return part of it back. This one, I will admit, I am super guilty of. This is bracketing. This is where a consumer purchases several items at one time with the intent of only keeping one or a small portion of what they actually purchased. So they're trying to really use their home as a fitting room. They're trying to make sure that they're covered for that wedding or that special event that they have coming up. But of course, this can be very problematic for us as merchants as well. If I'm purchasing 8 summer dresses at the end of August, I'm waiting 30 days to return them, and then I'm sending them back. By the time they're inspected and relisted, are you as the merchant going to be able to resell those dresses at full price at the end of September when they're summer styles? Maybe not. And then the final item here is wardrobing. So this is where a consumer is purchasing something, they're wearing it, they're using it, and they're going to go ahead and send it back after they're done. So if any of you sell apparel, this is probably a very, very common occurrence for you, getting clothing back that has makeup or deodorant stains all over it, product that is damaged. But actually, this category is not just for apparel merchants. Really, this can apply to anything that is a consumer feels like they can rent from the merchant. So you can think about like a large TV before Super Bowl weekend with, again, the intent of sending it back. Or maybe you have a student that is abroad or somewhere for just the summer period, so they're going to buy one of those mattresses in a box. They're going to use it for 2 months, and they're going to go ahead and send it back. Okay, so when the product is returned, if the product is actually returned, it's estimated that about 25% of those returns cannot actually be resold because of seasonality, because of damage, or because it's just too prohibitively costly to get that item resold again or restocked again. Signifyd estimates that the true cost of a return is actually about 3.7 times the original price of the sale. When you're accounting for shipping and handling 2 ways, repackaging, restocking, and reselling that item. So that $180 billion a year problem for US merchants is actually just the tip of the iceberg. It's really looking something more like $670 billion. And that's not even considering the opportunity cost. So back to my summer dress example, if you sold product to an abusive merchant or abusive consumer when you were low on inventory and supply chains were crunched, you lost the opportunity to sell that product to a legitimate buyer who could have resulted in lifetime value. So really, that's the ultimate kind of punch in the gut. That's the ultimate blow. So now, what's the answer? Following my last slide, it'd be very easy to say, okay, let's protect the bottom line. Let's enact stricter return policies. Let's start to build up barriers. But obviously, we know it's not as simple as that either. Consumers expect returns online to be free. They expect them to be easy. And they say that they will stop buying with a brand after simply one poor return experience. So if this consumer has previous experience with your brand, Maybe they will give you another chance after a bad return experience. Something wasn't quite as easy as they had hoped. But if this is a first-time shopper on your site and the return experience doesn't go smoothly, it's a problem. Expectations that consumers have are only continuing to rise as each of us every day continues to innovate and make the purchase journey more seamless for all of our consumers. They're only getting more and more demanding. And the final trend that I really want to highlight that is really putting pressure on return strategy today is the growing focus on sustainability. So you'd be hard-pressed today to find a retailer that doesn't have sustainability as a board-level directive or at least as kind of a guiding principle of how they operate. Consumers are becoming increasingly aware of the impact of e-commerce on the environment. So I don't know what your houses look like, but I trip over Amazon boxes every time I'm walking out the door, and I'm constantly thinking to myself, like, how many trees is this? Questions about packaging, questions about the movement of goods. What is the carbon footprint of my return? So more sustainable return solutions are only gaining more traction as we as consumers start to question our own habits and start to demand more from the retailers that we work with. Okay, so all of these kind of forces bring us here to this moment of time, this period in the history of e-commerce where return strategy and return process is really ripe for disruption. Returns can no longer be an afterthought or something that we are not very intentional about. It is time for us to treat returns as a more strategic driver for the business. So the first step, getting into some of the more actionable advice for you. So the first step is really is to start to rethink the role of returns in your business. Start to reimagine returns as a profit center. So the moment a customer requests a return can actually be a very important moment for you and your brand, a very important opportunity for you to take advantage of. It's a point in their journey that's probably the most painful interaction. Hopefully it's the most painful interaction they will have with you and your brand. The return process for consumers is confusing, it's inconvenient, it's frustratingly slow, and how you manage that moment matters. You can show consumers how you deal with them in both good times and in bad. And if you are able to help them find a new product that works better for them, if you're able to upsell them to a different product, or again, simply navigate that moment with thoughtfulness and empathy, returns can absolutely be a revenue driver for your business. So I have one really simple example here, but this was a longitudinal study that looked at retailers that required customers to pay for returns and those that didn't. They looked at spend of those consumers over the course of 2 years. And what they found was after 2 years, those merchants that required consumers to pay for returns, those consumers actually decreased their spend by 75% to 100% over that 2-year period. So they nearly completely eliminated spend or completely stopped shopping with those merchants. Customers who had free returns, on the other hand, increased spending over that same period of time by as much as 450%. So my point here is that returns can absolutely be the next lever you pull on to unlock revenue if you manage them appropriately. So step 2 is really to leverage the power of a commerce network to decision more intelligently. So as it seems to be with everything these days, technology can help us to solve our problems. Or rather, in this case, technology in combination with all of you banding together as merchants can help us to solve this problem. So when you're looking at the behavior of a shopper on a single site alone, you inherently have a very limited view of that shopper. You can only see what they've done or what they're doing within the four walls of your store. But when you leverage the power of a network of merchants, you instantly gain a much clearer picture of that shopper and their intent and their history. So you can actually start to connect a lot of these data points. You can connect profiles of shoppers by, for example, device ID or IP address or hundreds of other variables that help you figure out who this shopper is on your site. And also, for example, if it was a shopper that had created several different accounts with your store, they had several different email addresses associated. It can be hard to tell who's really this new buyer that you should roll out the red carpet for, and who's an abusive customer that you should be a little more wary of. But when you're leveraging the network, that gets a lot easier. So when Signifyd is looking at an order or is looking at a request for a refund, 98% of the time, we can identify that shopper instantly. Again, because we've seen them before. We've seen them shop, maybe not at your store, but we've seen them shop at Walmart or Samsung or eBay or any of the other tens of thousands of merchants that we work with. And that allows us to create a score and identify a level of risk associated with that buyer. And with that score, we can make a recommendation on what to do with that person. Do we accept the order? Do we reject the order? Or do we hold? Do we need to do a little bit more research? So with that intelligence and with that score in hand, you can really start to provide each shopper the experience that they actually really deserve. So for your VIP customers, for your best shoppers, you can roll out the red carpet. You can offer a free return. You can send them a label. Maybe you offer a pickup so that you make, again, that return really easy for them. You can, here's the big money maker, you can instantly refund their order. And how great would that be if you could tell your consumer, thank you so much for your loyalty, you don't need to wait. Your refund was issued instantly and it'll be in your account within the next 24 hours. So you can really do everything to make sure that you're creating lifetime value from those customers. For your buyers that are maybe just kind of your average shoppers, you can, for example, maybe offer them a promo code so that they can find something else that works better for them. But maybe you don't refund immediately. Maybe you wait until the product has been shipped back, or you wait until the product has been inspected by your team before you actually release that refund. Oh, that's supposed to be a flag. That's a red flag, a pink flag. For your shoppers that are raising pink flags, maybe you require them to go in store to actually make their return. Maybe you have them. You have a retail associate actually evaluate that product in front of them. And maybe it's a little inconvenient for them to go into the store and a little bit awkward when somebody's like looking at the product in front of them. But in this case, that is by design. That's a feature, not a bug. You want to start to build up some of these barriers in order to discourage bad behavior when appropriate. Or, for example, if you have a customer that has they're saying the product was never received, but you have delivery confirmation, and you see that they have a history of INR abuse. Maybe in that case, you can actually ask them to fill out a police report before you're going to release the return or the refund. So again, making it a little bit more difficult for them when it's appropriate. And then finally, for your customers that are just the absolute worst, the truly serial abusive, you can make all sales final sales. They can purchase whatever they want from you, but unfortunately, they're not going to be able to return any of the product if they're really in that category. So now, of course, these are all examples. All of these policies should be tailored to your business, and they should be tested. There's absolutely no one-size-fits-all approach that is going to work well. Every merchant has a different level or a different appetite for risk, and a different level of comfort. So these should be, ultimately up to the merchant to decide what makes the most sense for your business. But it's actually easier than ever to start to simulate a lot of these different scenarios, which is one of the screenshots that I have up on the screen here. Signifyd's product starting to adjust the rules and figure out how different orders would be decisioned differently. So you can plug in historical data sets before you're making any real policy adjustments, and you can simulate what would happen. You can dig into some of these cases and say, is this actually how I would want this shopper to be treated or to be decisioned? So my last point here is just to be intentional about all of the decisions that we are making. We want to make sure that we're providing not only the best experience for the consumer, but also the experience that is best for you, is best for the retailer, the experience that ultimately will deliver the highest value to you in the long run. So remember who the purchaser in a return system is. The purchaser in a return system is you, the retailer, and you have to decide whether or not to make a purchase back from your customer. So be intentional about the purchases that you buy back. And that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much. I don't know how I'm doing on time. I think probably, yeah, right at time. So my email address is here. You can check us out, signifyd.com. I'm going to be right at our booth right behind you guys. I know that I'm holding you up from lunch, so please come find me. Would love to talk to you all more. Thank you so much.
That was so informative. Great stuff right there. One more time, Ashley Kiolbasa, ladies and gentlemen.